Leo's entanglement with gambling was like a chronic illness that festered for a decade. At first, the symptoms were mild, a mere harmless hum in the background of life, but it eventually metastasized into a malignant tumor capable of devouring the soul. In the early years, when the gambling wasn't yet all-consuming, Leo would lie awake at night, idly scrolling through Reddit threads about gambling addiction, reading the wreckage of lives typed out by anonymous strangers from across the globe. They claimed to have lost hundreds of thousands, millions, even tens of millions of dollars, their words dripping with despair and self-loathing. Back then, Leo, curled up in a rented apartment in the Los Angeles suburbs, still carrying the scent of cotton dust and machine oil from the factory, dismissed these stories as exaggerated theatrics, tales from a distant world. Leo couldn't fathom how someone could, for the fleeting thrill of the gambling table, sever all ties to reality, abandoning a loving family, draining every hard-earned penny, and burning their life to ashes. Even more baffling to Leo was why someone who'd climbed, through effort and intelligence, to the heights of hundreds of thousands or millions in wealth, with boundless choices and perspectives, would turn back to indulge in a primitive game built on chance and greed. It was like a pilot who'd mastered flying a jet, obsessively playing a losing coin toss. It wasn't until Leo, step by involuntary step, descended into the very abyss he'd once scoffed at, that he realized, in the soul-shredding agony of it all, that every punctuation mark in those seemingly outlandish stories was soaked in real, bitter tears. A gambler's endgame is like a meticulously designed program with few exits, each leading to a different hell. A rare few, with superhuman willpower and a final stroke of luck from Lady Fortune, manage to break free, gasping on the shore, but the corroded void in their soul remains unfillable. Some are swallowed whole by the tidal wave of debt, choosing to end their lives in utter despair, becoming a cold line in a news report, leaving loved ones with endless grief and confusion, and the vast majority, like Leo now, linger in a purgatory of neither ascent nor collapse, their souls long dead, leaving only a husk to wander aimlessly through the world, living a walking dead existence. If gambling had never existed, Leo's life might have been an enviable tale, brimming with the classic hues of the American dream. Leo is 40 now, a quintessential child of the 80s, raised in a Rust Belt town in Ohio, left behind by the tides of time. The air there always carried a complex smell, faint rust from abandoned steel mills after rain, mixed with the cheap beer and silent despair leaking from rundown bars. The town's sky was perpetually gray, mirroring the predictable, colorless futures of its residents. In that environment, Leo was forged with a steel-like resilience and an almost obsessive hunger for success. Leo would never forget that afternoon when he saw his father, a tough steelworker who'd toiled his whole life, broken by a single, flimsy layoff notice in his mid-40s. Sitting at the chipped kitchen table, silently smoking, the shame, confusion, and helplessness in his eyes, wreathed in smoke, carved themselves like a scalding knife into Leo's young memory. From that moment, a seed was planted deep within Leo. He swore he'd never repeat that fate. Leo wasn't just escaping poverty. He was fleeing the powerlessness of being at the mercy of fate. Leo's formal education ended at 17. With a fierce resolve to break free, he plunged into the torrent of society. Leo worked as a night shift warehouse security guard, patrolling in endless silence and solitude, accompanied only by cold racks and his elongated shadow under the lights, fighting crushing drowsiness with the distant buzz of city radio stations. Leo waited tables at a busy chain restaurant, learning to plaster on a humble smile and greasy air amid relentless customer demands, honing the ability to read moods and anticipate needs. Leo also toiled in obscure auto parts factories, the deafening roar of machines numbing his nerves as sweat soaked his uniform, day after repetitive day on the assembly line. Leo's family, like most blue-collar families of that era, had a simple, straightforward worldview. Their only hope was that Leo and his brother would grow up safely, land stable union jobs, marry, have kids, and live quietly. Getting rich was a distant myth, belonging to another world, irrelevant to them. After years of scraping by at society's bottom, Leo was like a caged beast, tirelessly seeking any chance to change his fate. He sold hot dogs and coffee at street corners in the biting pre-dawn chill, hawking to sparse passers-by. He drove a beat-up pickup salvaged from a junkyard, hustling second-hand furniture between flea markets in different towns, sharpening his bargaining skills against cunning wholesalers. These attempts, riddled with failure and frustration, didn't make Leo rich but served as a coarse whetstone, honing his mind and amassing invaluable business acumen and street smarts. In Leo's darkest, most aimless days, he met Sarah. She was a waitress at the restaurant where Leo worked, her eyes clear and her smile as warm as California sunshine. She saw through Leo's tough, posturing exterior and grandiose plans, glimpsing the desperate ambition born of deep insecurity. Their first date was at a cash-only corner pizza joint, where they talked all night over cheap beer. Leo spun visions of a grand future, plans others might dismiss as delusional, and Sarah listened quietly, her eyes free of doubt, filled only with trust. After a year together, they married in a simple city hall ceremony. Looking back, Sarah was the greatest stroke of luck in Leo's early life. Like a beacon, she illuminated his chaotic existence, and her unwavering support carried him through a full cycle, from nothing to success and ultimately, to destroying it all himself. Soon after their marriage, a distant relative offered Leo a rare opportunity in the garment industry. It was a large textile factory in North Carolina, far from the bleak Rust Belt Leo knew. Leaving his newlywed Sarah, Leo boarded a southbound train alone. At first, he was an unremarkable laborer, hauling tons of raw cotton or cleaning machines in sweltering, humid workshops. Factory life was dull and oppressive. The only entertainment was after-hours card games among co-workers. Payday meant crowded dorm rooms turned into gambling dens, with modest bets, wins and losses usually in the hundreds. That was Leo's first real brush with gambling. When luck turned sour and he lost money, Leo would silently vow never to touch the damn thing again. But those vows were fragile, shattered in days by the itch to join the table at his co-workers' calls. Leo naively thought such losses would deter him, a lesson learned. Only later did he realize he hadn't become a gambling addict, then simply because his meager wages forced a natural caution. Leo stayed at that factory for nearly 5 years, channeling the memory of his father's defeated eyes into relentless drive. Like a dry sponge, he soaked up everything about the industry, from identifying fabric counts and weights to operating and repairing complex textile machines to mastering every link in the supply chain. With unyielding determination and extraordinary effort, Leo rose from a dispensable grunt to a production line supervisor, eventually becoming a plant manager. His salary soared, and his ambitions grew like wild weeds after rain. While Sarah raised their young child back home, Leo, alone, tasted unprecedented freedom. This unsupervised freedom became a breeding ground for indulgence. Using his authority, Leo had illicit affairs with younger female colleagues, cracks in the moral dam he'd carefully built, foreshadowing a catastrophic collapse. The turning point came when Leo met Wallace, a seasoned investor, at an industry event. With deep industry knowledge and meticulous data, Leo pitched a bold new business model to bypass traditional distribution channels and directly serve major retailers. Wallace, a wily veteran, was initially skeptical but saw the hungry glint in Leo's eyes and his uncanny grasp of industry details. They struck a deal. Wallace provided most of the capital, Leo a smaller share and full operational control, and they co-founded a garment factory. With Leo's years of experience and connections, the factory took off almost overnight. Leo ruthlessly poached major clients from his former employer, knowing their every pain point and need. Offering lower prices, better quality, and flexible production cycles, he won them over. It was blatant commercial betrayal, but Leo felt no guilt, seeing it as a necessary step to success, the natural law of the marketplace. His business soared, wealth flooding in at an unprecedented pace. Leo remembered how a monthly salary of $10,000 as a plant manager once felt like the pinnacle of satisfaction. Now, his monthly income easily topped $50,000, sometimes more. He moved his family from that grim Ohio town to a gated Los Angeles mansion with a pool. Sarah drove a brand new BMW X5, Leo a commanding Range Rover. The first time Leo walked into a Rodeo Drive boutique and bought an expensive Patek Philippe watch without glancing at the price tag, it felt like compensation for all his past struggles, proof he'd escaped the humble, paycheck-to-paycheck self. If life could have frozen at that triumphant peak, Leo might have lived out a stable, enviable existence, another version of the American dream. But by 35, the cautious diligence of his entrepreneurial early days had been eroded by a cushy, affluent life, replaced by an insatiable chase for pleasure and thrills. That's when Leo truly plunged into gambling's abyss. It started as a social ritual among business peers. Every weekend, fellow bosses gathered in a private room at an upscale steakhouse, playing high-stakes Texas Hold'em. The bets here dwarfed the small-time dorm games of Leo's factory days. A single night's wins or losses could reach hundreds of thousands. Leo witnessed several once high-flying bosses lose everything, unable to pay employees, fleeing in disgrace under cover of night. Yet these living cautionary tales didn't wake Leo. They fueled a reckless, fatal confidence. He stubbornly believed their losses stemmed from a lack of smarts or discipline, that he was different, in control. Leo's life grew increasingly decadent and hollow. Days were spent managing factory affairs. Nights were lost in LA's glitziest nightclubs, squandering money amid blaring music and fawning dancers, then, numbed by alcohol, heading with so-called friends to secret underground casinos for all-night gambling binges. Leo recalled one night when his luck was unreal, winning over $200,000 as the table's dealer, sweeping the board. That easy money obliterated his sense of its value. The next day, he spent it lavishly, tipping nightclub dancers thousands. The rush of being a big spender, adored and untouchable, was far more addictive than the slow grind of running a factory. But a gambler's luck is just a high-interest loan from the casino, one you repay with crushing interest. In that hedonistic circle, losing became routine. Each loss made Leo's rational mind scream about tomorrow's cash flow, but the devil of wishful thinking always won out. After so many losses, probability owes me a win, Leo would tell himself, falling prey to the gambler's fallacy, dragging him deeper into ruin. Within 2 years, Leo was a regular at LA's underground casinos, then, lured by whispers of easier wins and looser dealers, began frequent trips to Las Vegas. He burned through his personal savings, then, hiding it from Sarah, sold his prized Range Rover. When that was gone, in the haze of a devastating loss one dawn, Leo made the fatal choice. He began embezzling factory funds. Exploiting his knowledge of the company's finances, he faked suppliers and forged accounts, siphoning money meant for raw materials and wages into his personal account, then blowing it in Vegas VIP rooms. In 2 years, Leo lost an estimated $3 million. Only when his account dwindled to double digits did he realize those online stories of million-dollar losses weren't exaggerated. When gambling takes hold, $1,000 and $10,000 feel the same, just abstract numbers, colorful chips, with one thought. Bet it all for that fleeting chance to turn it around. The truth couldn't stay hidden. Wallace, Leo's partner, uncovered the mess through erratic accounts and supplier complaints. In his office, without rage or shouting, just a chilling disappointment in his eyes, he threw Leo's forged records and invoices on the desk. Leo felt like a thief stripped naked in public, all dignity gone. Kicked out of the company he'd built, his reputation in tatters from past betrayals, and now this scandal, Leo was blacklisted in the industry. Human nature is brutally practical. When Leo was on top, he was lauded for his brilliance. When he fell, the praise turned to scorn. Leo was left with hundreds of thousands in debt. It was his family, especially Sarah, whom he'd betrayed and heartbroken, who didn't abandon him in his darkest hour. They scraped together their savings and borrowed from relatives to pay off half the debt. Over the next few years, Leo quit gambling, took a modest management job earning a fraction of his peak income, and scrimped to pay off the rest, each payment a penance for his past. Now debt-free, Leo lives an ordinary life. But looking in the mirror at his graying, 40-something self, regret consumes him. Besides the house they live in, Leo has nothing left. Life is unpredictable. One day you're dripping in wealth, the next you're penniless. Failure from business losses or bad investments, Leo could accept as bad luck or lack of skill. But losing everything to gambling is a wound that never heals, a defeat not to the market or rivals, but to the basest greed and stupidity within himself. If time could rewind, Leo swears he'd never touch a deck of cards again.